Hello, and welcome to today's live chapter reading of Watcher, Star-Crossed Celestials, Duet number 1 by A.L. Morrow, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Oh, speak again, bright angel, for thou art as glorious to this night, being o'er my head as is a winged messenger of heaven. William Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet. Chapter 1, Jace. The scent of beer hung in the air like an alcoholic fog. Jace hated it. The rot, the vaguely sweet undertones, the way it made the vomit on the floor of the men's bathroom that much more pungent. How humans could drink such a beverage in the quantities they did mystified him. Of course, many would probably say the same about the whiskey he was currently nursing, absent-mindedly turning the glass one corner of a counterclockwise rotation every few seconds. But he didn't care. He was as entitled to his opinion as anyone else. Not that he put much stock in the views of those who frequented dive bars like Knox. Besides, he had enough misery to wallow in as it was. Bloody hell, don't tell me you're moping over Lucian again, are you? Cassian had a way of saying things that stink of duplicity. In this case, his words were chosen to sound sympathetic, while his voice had a whine, betraying his annoyance with Jace's slack shoulders and moody frown. That's what Jace got for befriending demons, he supposed. Quickly, he snatched at the small notepad sitting on the counter by his wrist and tucked it into his back pocket instead. He couldn't let Cassian see. It would only encourage him, convince him that he was right. And Cassian was exactly the kind of demon that needed no further encouragement. Don't think I didn't notice you squirreling away that little book you like to write your sad-ass poetry in, mate, he teased as he slid onto the stool beside him. Yeah, your powers of observation are impressive, Jace huffed. Maybe you should be the watcher instead of me. The demon clapped him on the back and let out a laugh. Then he raised his other hand, flagging down Hesper from the opposite end of the bar, without waiting for Jace's response. Jace took a sip of his whiskey as his sister glanced up, grinned, and sashayed over to where they were sitting. Most Celestials could blend in well enough with the humans. Well, as long as they didn't show their wings. Anyway, Hesper was not one of them. Her violet speckled blue eyes and sleek dark hair shone like the stars their ancestors had been born from, and her skin had a moon-like sheen. She was literally a piece of the heavens right here in Sin City, and she knew it. And by the way, the other men, along with a couple of the women in the bar, followed her every movement. It seemed they could sense it too. I was wondering when you'd finally get here, Hesper said, leaning over the bar in front of Cassian. Her voice was whispery, dripping with seduction. She reached over to run a hand through Cassian's spiky, dyed blue hair and gave his lower lip a nip, just above the labrae piercing protruding from his chin. I missed you. The demon's irises turned golden red, fiery. It was their natural state, the color they reverted to when he lost concentration, when his baser instincts overtook the literal face of respectability he constantly struggled to maintain. Right now, Jace was certain the cause of Cassian's distraction was Hesper and the raging hard-on she had undoubtedly given him. Have I ever let you down? He asked her, chasing her mouth with another taste of her lips. At the other end of the bar, a few men groaned with disappointment, as though only realizing, when seeing Hesper with Cassian, that the sultry bartender was already taken, never to be theirs. As if any of those broke, beer-bellied assholes ever had a shot with Hesper to begin with, Jace thought darkly. Hesper stood up and gave her boyfriend a grin fiendish enough that if Jace didn't know otherwise, he might have assumed she was the demon instead. Not yet, she told him, but there's still time. We have eternity. Cassian laughed. Beneath the bar, he rubbed his palm against the front of his jeans, clearly seeking some form of relief from the bulge there. The usual? Hesper asked. You know it. His eyes flickered with amber again, then settled on her ass as she turned to fix his drink. The usual entailed more than a double vodka on the rocks. It also involved a quick fuck in the staff lounge when she took her 15-minute break. Jace knew this, even though he wished he didn't. He learned of this ritual accidentally one evening on his way to the men's room, the den of stale piss and vile puke, and the place where Cassian had told him he was also headed a few minutes before. Newsflash, that wasn't where Jace found him. I'll be off in 20, Hesper said as she slid the drink over to Cassian a moment later. He lifted the highball, then we'll get off in 25. 5 whole minutes, Jace said, eyebrows raised as his friend turned back to him, drink in hand. Is that due to the thoroughness of your foreplay or your stamina during the main event? Cassian laughed again. What bothers you more, Jace? That Hesper is your sister, or that I get laid on a routine basis while you keep whining over Lucian? Jace rolled his eyes. Lucian and I very much remain broken up, he mumbled into his glass as he took another drink. It's not him that's the problem this time. That got Cassian's attention at least. He nearly choked on his gulp of vodka before putting down the glass. Come again? Is that what you're going to do later, or do you really want me to repeat myself? The demon feigned a pout. You wound me. It's as though you think I have a one-tracked mind. Well, I say it takes one to know one, except where you think about cock all day, I dream of nothing but your sister's sweet. He went silent abruptly, stifling a chuckle at Jace's sudden glare, and he raised both hands in a show of surrender. For the record, I was going to say perfume. Hesper Sweet perfume. It's something floral, very lovely. One could say it makes her smell like an absolute angel. Cassian scoffed as he placed emphasis on the final word in his sentence, referring to Hesper. And in turn, Jace himself, by the loathed term that humans, in their abundant ignorance, had long ago assigned to their kind. You're very witty, Cassian, Jace told him. If this whole being a demon thing doesn't work out, you should consider a career in stand-up. I hear the Archipelago has a popular open mic night. How do you know I haven't tried it already? Cassian smirked, then reached over, clasped Jace on both of his shoulders, and gave his body an affectionate shake. Now tell me, if it wasn't lover boy Lucian that made you into such a miserable wanker tonight, then who did? I'd like to use my vile ways to teach the gobshed a lesson. And I beg you, leave out none of the sordid details. I like to do my homework on my future experiments in devilry. It makes the torture so much more effective that way. Devilry, another nonsensical term fabricated by humans, this time in association with Cassian's kind. At least Cassian was an equal opportunist when it came to mockery. Jace swallowed down the rest of his whiskey. Have you heard of a messenger called Rigel? Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Cassian repeated Jace's full name for drama, a barometer of his displeasure, while shaking his head and letting out a deep, dark sigh. First, don't call me that. You'll get us all killed, including Hesper, Jace scolded. And second, he pushed his empty glass aside and propped his elbows on the bar, clutching at his skull like his head ached. Second is that I know. The demon folded his arms over his chest. His disappointment was palpable, hanging in the space between their bar stools like a storm clouds hovering on the horizon. Why must you always want what you can't have? He said. You really do this to yourself, my friend. You need to stop thinking with your prick. Find yourself a nice bloke, another watcher, mind you, and lie low for a millennium or two until this whole celestial war blows over, like your sister and me. As though to underscore his point, Cassian glanced toward Hesper, pouring out tequila shots for a rowdy group of young women. The girls wore fluffy pink boas and beaded necklaces with plastic dildos on them. They stank of a bachelorette party almost as much as the bathroom stank of beer vomit. Hesper happened to look up in time to catch Cassian's eye, and she pursed her full red lips together as though kissing him from afar. Don't you think that's what I want too? Jace looked up at his friend. It's not like messengers and watchers are a separate species. We're both celestials, separated by an arbitrary line drawn in the sand. It's all completely ridiculous. How dare you imply my very existence is arbitrary and ridiculous, Cassian said. But he couldn't say the words out with a straight face. Instead, a cheeky grin curled his lips. Both of them knew the truth. Demons were a critical component in the history behind the Celestials' feud. They were evidence the Watchers had disobeyed the original orders given to them by the first sphere seraphim who ruled in Themis, their native realm. The Watchers were meant to do exactly what their name implied, watch over the humans. It wasn't the messenger's fault too many Watchers decided to take the instruction literally. So literally, they procreated with the humans, producing demon offspring. It wasn't the messenger's fault leadership in Themis sent them here either. They were dispatched to the mortal realm in droves, tasked with cleaning up the mess the disgraced Watchers had made for mingling with humanity. What was the messenger's fault, though, was that they treated Watchers, even purebred ones with no trace of demon blood, like Jace and Hesper, as if they were criminals. They rounded them up, killing some, arresting others. Those who survived were contained in Las Vegas, Sin City, the most aptly named place on earth for so called fallen angels and their demonic descendants. Now, Jace gave Cassian a wilting look. He was in no mood for his friend's antics, or the reminder that physical proof of the enmity between the Watchers and messengers was sitting right in front of him. Apparently realizing this, Cassian sobered. He cleared his throat and waved one of his hands, urging Jace to continue. So, how did you meet this Rigel? I saw him walking out of Nova, he resumed moodily, turning his empty whiskey glass in his hand as he spoke. It was a useful distraction, one that helped him forget the beautiful dark haired man he'd met earlier, if only slightly. And just why, pray tell, were you at Nova, of all places? Link sent me. It's a little thing called reconnaissance. I am part of the Watcher's underground army, after all. Jace lowered his voice at the last part, and he glanced cautiously around the bar, just as he had when Cassian addressed him by his given name. And that's all the more reason for you to keep your dick zipped safely in your pants this time around, the demon scolded. Who would have thought a demon, of all creatures, would ever be the voice of reason in Jace's life? The realization made him glower. Nothing happened yet, we only talked. But you want something to happen, mate. That's almost the same where you're concerned. Damn Cassian. He'd known him too well for too long. What if it was just a fuck? A one-time thing, not forever, Jace suggested it quickly, desperately bargaining with himself as much as Cassian. You know, a rebound after Lucian. The demon quirked an eyebrow, skeptical. You truly think you're capable of keeping it casual? You know how you get. You fall head over heels in a heartbeat. So, since when is being all in a bad thing? Even as Jace said the words, self-doubt churned inside his chest. He was telling lies neither of them believed. Since it usually results in me scraping your wallowing, whiskey-soaked ass off the floor with an angel-sized shovel. Cassian shook his head slowly and sighed. If you're only after a rebound, you could find one in any back alley of this side of town, watcher, demon, or human, for cheap, too. Hell, I know a demon or two who'd happily volunteer to suck you off for free. The reality is, you're addicted to men you can't or shouldn't have. It's really quite mental. I have half a mind to resuscitate Freud so he can spend some time diagnosing whatever bits and bobs have gone awry in that handsome little head of yours. Jace was too absorbed in his melancholy to even sneer at Cassian's insult. He simply washed his hand over his face, as though trying to wipe the memory of Rigel from his mind. We only spoke for a few minutes. He doesn't know I'm a celestial, let alone a watcher. If I could just see him again. Doesn't know you're a celestial? Cassian let out a snort of skepticism. You have seen your sister, right? I hate to break it to you, Romeo, but you've got the same gorgeous heavenly genes as she does. There it was again, another dig at their shared celestial origins. Laughing, he reached over and ruffled Jace's already tousled, brushed up hair. Those jet black tresses and dreamy blue eyes, that moon glow skin. If I was into blokes, you'd be exactly my type. Lucky for us both, there's Hesper. Lucky for us both? Cassian nodded. Lucky for me that I'm the unworthy bastard she chose. He threw back the rest of his vodka, then gave Jace a teasing wink. And lucky for you because I'd wear you out, demon libido being what it is. Highly unlikely. Despite his protest, a reluctant grin tilted Jace's lips, and he laughed. Also, I'm seriously rethinking letting you kiss my sister with that foul mouth of yours. The demon shrugged. It's all right. Don't need to kiss to do what I have planned for us in the break room. Jace groaned and winced, once again recalling the night he'd discovered them together, a memory that haunted him the same way war did a soldier. Please, for the love of all things, not so holy, remember to lock the door this time. He patted Cassian's hand on the bar with mocking concern. I implore you, for all of our sakes, consider it a public service. I rather like being an exhibitionist, though. This is Vegas, after all, but I suppose if you insist, Cassian chuckled, then nudged his friend in his shoulder. So, what's the plan? The plan? Jace felt his brows wrinkle in confusion, even as Cassian clucked his tongue scoldingly. Yes, the demon drawled, as though the answer should have been obvious. You know, how are we to woo your fair Rigel? Write him a sonnet, Send him some daisies? Or do you think he's more of a wine and dine sort? The watcher's fingertips stilled on his empty whiskey tumbler. Surely he'd misheard. You're going to help me with Rigel? What happened to it being a shitty idea? It is a shite idea, mate, but I'm up for it anyway. I'm a demon, not a bloody saint. We've been friends for how long now? 2 centuries? You know me better than that. As though to prove his point on his lack of sainthood, Cassian leaned over the bar to still a bottle of vodka and refill both of their glasses. But he was right. Demons were not known for their altruistic tendencies. Even when it came to lending a friend a helping hand, knowing this, Jace's eyes narrowed shrewdly. All right, what's in it for you? You're nowhere near as dim as you look when you're horny, you know that? Cassian told him, pointing a finger in his face before taking a sip from his glass. Jace had the not so subtle feeling he should be insulted, but after decades of friendship, he'd grown rather used to the demon's incessant, double edged compliments. They were part of his charm. Inevitably, your problems become my problems, and I do hate to hear your whining, Cassian continued. By helping you, I'm also helping myself. Besides, I've been told I'm an excellent wingman, and since you swear this dalliance will be a one-time thing, I see no real harm. Just don't tell Hesper. She says I enable you enough as it is. Jace glanced down the bar toward his sister again. That clever little traitress. Hesper was flirting with a customer now, a human, leading him on just enough to get a few extra dollars in her tip. Maybe in Cassian enabled Jace's bad behavior, but the demon's cunning had rubbed off on her a bit over the years, too. Still, Jace couldn't fault his sister for her concern. She'd been stitching back together the pieces of his perpetually broken heart since they were children. Cassian had only been doing it for a couple of centuries. At least this time, Jace understood up front how things would end with Rigel. A messenger and a watcher could never be. Their expiration date was written in the stars before they ever even spoke. All right, wingman, you're hired. He swallowed down some vodka. As for the plan, I was thinking. Rumor has it there's a unit of new messengers arriving from Themis in a few days. They're reinforcements or some bullshit like that. Apparently, you demons have been up to no good lately. Cassian smirked. We are a rowdy lot. You know what that means. The red carpets will be rolled out at Nova to greet them. A real gala. This their social event of the year, Jace continued. Everyone will be so focused on impressing the new arrivals, they won't notice if a watcher sneaks into their little welcome party. Infiltrating the messenger's hallowed ground. Sounds dangerous and devilish and delicious. Jace couldn't remember the last time he'd seen Cassian's grin so wild. You find out when this soiree takes place, and I'll figure out a way to get us in. The demon's words barely had time to reach Jace's ears before a deafening blast thundered through the air. Jace glanced over his shoulder to see a flutter of bronze and ivory crashing through the now shattered glass wall behind him. Messengers. As he scrambled to his feet, his heart pounded against his chest like the burst that birthed the cosmos. Beside him, Cassian let out a furious hit. Bollocks! It's a raid.